Have you ever wondered why your body feels constantly on edge, even when your life doesn't look dangerous? Are you tired of feeling exhausted and inflamed or stuck in survival mode, no matter how much mindset work or meditation you do? What if I told you that your stress response isn't a flaw? It's actually an ancient survival reflex that your body just never got to complete. If you can relate to this, you're definitely not alone. So many women, especially those with autoimmune conditions, are living in a constant state of nervous system activation without even realizing it. Welcome back to the Health Bridge podcast. I'm your host, Holly B, and I help women with lupus and other chronic autoimmune conditions reduce flares, restore energy, and reconnect to their bodies through holistic healing so they can return to their passions and their purpose. Today, I'm joined by Richmond Heath. He's a physiotherapist and international trauma-informed movement educator and one of the leading voices in helping people understand how stress and trauma are stored and released through the body. We're diving into what's actually happening in your nervous system during stress and trauma, why your autoimmune symptoms are a sign that your body is stuck in a physiological trauma response, and how natural movement reflexes can support healing in ways that mindset work alone just can't. By the end of the episode, you'll understand why stress isn't just mental, how your body is wired for release, and what powerful healing tool is missing in your healing journey. Stick around because we're answering the question, how do we help the body complete the stress response instead of just living in it? Richmond Heath, I'm so happy that the third time is a charm and we are finally talking on the podcast. Welcome.
Thanks, Holly. We got there. So very much looking forward to it.
Wonderful. I want to dive right into what actually the stress and trauma response is. And I think it's really a buzzword right now in the whole holistic healing world of fight and flight response and trauma. But can you get into detail for us, for those that want to actually know what that means, and in order to understand what is going on in our bodies, in the physiology of our bodies when we are hitting that stress and trauma response?
Yeah. So as you know, right, there is endless information about the role of the body in stress and trauma. Body keeps the score. Body bears the burden. Body remembers. It's everywhere. And because of the historical pattern of cognitive behavioral therapy being the primary sort of approach of at least Western medicine and mental health in this field over the last 30, 40 years. So there's a lot of focus on, like, everyone knows the fight and flight response. I'm fighting or I'm fleeing, or the freeze or even the fold or collapse response. So we all sort of know that information, but we think about it globally. Like, I'm in a freeze response, my whole body is shut down. Whereas one of the elements which is really overlooked and missing is that ultimately our stress and trauma responses are less about behavior. I mean, they're still about behavior, but primarily, first and foremost, they're about movement. All right. Polyvagal theory, which has been revolutionary, understanding there's these three phases of or three states primary. There's lots more than that, but to make it the most simple, three primary states of the autonomic nervous system, where we've got the ventral vagal state, which is the newest, calm, relaxed movement. All right. That means my body is moving calmly. I'm expressing behaviorally calmness, and it's real calmness, but also within the systems of my body, my immune system is working calmly. My heart rate is working calm. Everything's moving calmly. It's pulsating. It's free. Then when we move into fight or flight is about generating more movement, more power, more speed, superhuman beyond what I can cognitively generate. And when we look at the neuroscience, Holly, it's very clear the movement comes first, the emotion comes second. A split millisecond afterwards, we tend to think, I'm scared because I'm running from the bear. Whereas really, if you look at the nervous system level, what happens is there's a bear, your body picks up that potential perceived threat before we are consciously aware. it starts to generate that response. If the movements begin, the heart starts pounding, everything starts to speed up in the body, and then the body starts to run. And the last thing that happens a split second later is we go, oh, wow, I noticed that I'm feeling terrified. And why am I running? And then we finally find out I'm running because of the bear. But the first response is about the movement system, both global movement, but more importantly for us, movement within the physiology of the body, the heart rate, the breathing, the circulation, the immune system, all of these things. And then when we go into the classic and what everyone knows about that freeze or that fold or that dorsal vagal, that shutdown survival response, that's about containing movement. Like if I'm terrified of the bear, being scared doesn't actually help. Me feeling terrified, the emotion of it is almost irrelevant. All the emotion does is it adds another layer of charge and energy to the movement response. And so this is where, especially when people are getting into, autoimmune and those long-term chronic shutdown states, there's a containment of the movements that the body wants to make when it's free to express the fight or flight or the stress response. And fight or flight is really stress, where the body's saying, hey, we've got the potential to overcome this. And trauma to the physiology of the body is when it goes into the immobility response. And the reason this is so important, the reason why polyvagal theory is so important, is it shows us that when our system goes down into those freeze, shutdown, overwhelmed states, it's not that it's really lowly activated, like we think depression's low energy. It's actually a more heightened state than the fight or flight response. So even though we feel like numb, shut down, disconnected, slow, depressed, low energy, it's actually a more highly charged state of the nervous system where on top of the movements that still want to happen, the system then has to contain that movement and suppress it and hold it in. And it can do that one of two ways. Either the body creates muscular tension, which stops the movements. So it's like driving a car. The accelerator is still on, but the emergency brake comes on over the top. So we feel like we've got low energy, chronic low energy, or, my autoimmune condition it's wearing me down. I can't. And so it feels like what we need to do is have more energy, whereas what we often aren't taught is going, no, actually that is a more heightened and charged system. It's just that it's all contained internally compared to the fight or flight response when I'm feeling stressed. And then if that's not working, if in the case of the bear, if we're fighting back in that moment, if the bear's got us, that stimulates predators. So the body has to contain that by bracing for impact. But if that's not working and we're totally overwhelmed, then we move into that fold or collapse response, where then the system actually starts to disconnect us from ourselves and our body, so that ultimately if we die, we don't have to feel that. And so when we recognize that these chronic trauma states where the body is actively recreating immobility not just in my behavior and my life and my emotional experience, but in the tissues of the body. I could have a really low heart rate that looks like I'm calm. So I think, there's not enough charge, but that's being caused by the body holding it down. And this is where we get into autoimmune, is these chronic states where the body is almost locked in a battle, in that sympathetic, it wants to move, but it wants to suppress the movement. And there's that internal fight. And when we recognize that those unresolved trauma states are immobility states, then it makes sense that the way to come out of those is we need to reawaken movement. And I don't just mean, I want to consciously move, because the stress and trauma response is completely unconscious. We're not thinking ourselves into that. I mean, you can think about stuff and make yourself more stressed, but in the moment, all of that is happening completely subconsciously, not a conscious choice. And the process of mobilizing in fight or flight, or immobilizing in traumatic overwhelm, completely unconscious. And this is the beauty of where TRE, which we'll get into and talk about, is that we're reawakening spontaneous movement of the body through space, but also within the systems of the body themselves, so that the reawakening and the rearousal, or what I like to call parasympathetic arousal, this sense that we're coming out of freeze. And mammals, when they go into hibernation states where everything starts to shut down, when they come out of those states, their body spontaneously shakes and trembles and vibrates, and it literally brings itself back to life by reawakening the pulsation in the tissues and the movement within the systems. I'm sorry, that's a long answer, but this is critical perspective that at the moment in that the trauma paradigm, everything is about the body, but then we tend to go, right, we know this is all happening subconsciously, but at the moment, most of our tools are cognitively directed. Even I've got to do yoga, I've got to do meditation. These are great things, but we're still doing them. They're being driven by our conscious mind. I'm consciously moving or I'm consciously calming down. And what we're doing with TRE is we're adding back in this automatic, autonomic, subconscious reawakening of the system.
So let's talk a little bit more about that movement response versus the emotion. I want to get a little bit deeper into that because I'm sure our listeners, they're hearing what you're saying. It takes a little bit more to really understand what you mean by that.
Yeah.
Like we were talking before we started recording about crying. And you were saying how we always appreciate the emotion of things without realizing how important the movement is to that process of release. And so when you are crying and when we're done with that crying, it feels good. We feel like we've released, and we're thinking it's because we really expressed the emotion of whatever it was that triggered the sobbing or the crying. In fact, you're saying that it's that when you have that really full body cry and sob, you're shaking. Your lungs are really moving rapidly. Your shoulders might be shaking. That is the more important part of the release. Is that what I'm understanding?
Absolutely, 100%. So think about it this way, right? And this was an experience I had, I don't know, it was only a couple of years ago, where what I realized, Holly, was what I thought were my emotions. I thought, because I think something had happened and I was feeling really angry and I could feel all this anger inside me. And I'm going, oh my God, I'm feeling so angry. This is what my angry feels like. And it was really good because for years I'd had dreams that were all about terror. And I had very rarely had dreams that I was getting angry in my dreams. Like that part of my system was just contained. And I was having dreams about, being angry in dreams. And it was like this wonderful thing. It's like, wow, that part of my system is real. My power, all that's coming back online. But one day something happened, can't even remember what it was. And I was sitting there and I could feel that fuming emotion of anger inside me. Now, on the outside, if you were looking at me, you wouldn't have even known. Because I'm like, this is anger inside me. And in that moment, what I realized was that what I'd been calling my emotions, especially in relation to anger, was what I was experiencing was the containment of my emotions. Because I wasn't being angry. That anger wasn't coming out in the moment. It was just this big swelling pressure inside me. And that's what I thought anger was. So I had this moment of understanding of going, oh, hang on. What I've been feeling is not my emotion. Because if the body is not expressing it, what I'm experiencing is the containment of that emotion. And I love what you're talking about crying, because if I'm feeling scared, often generally, unless I'm fleeing, unless my body is running away, generally what we're feeling is the welling up of the energy that wants to move but's not being moved. And that's where crying, our diaphragm, is spontaneously shaking. It's moving itself what we call neurogenically, meaning the nervous system's creating. It's a bit more in depth than that, but it's a nice, easy term. And so, as you say, the crying is a full body reset rather than what we think of our emotions is our conscious experience of what's happening in our body. Right? So I like to think about this. Do we experience emotions while we're asleep? Isn't that interesting? Isn't that an interesting question? If I'm asleep and my body is jolting, if anyone who's got a dog or you watch kids sleep, the body's jolting, it's having a dream, it's having a response. But if I'm still asleep and unconscious, I would say I'm not having an emotion. So when there's something moving in the systems of the body, if you think about, the limbic system and the sort of the emotional centers of the brain, if we come up out of those systems, then that's our conscious awareness of what's happening in the body. And we tend to think that's what the emotion is. Whereas to the body doesn't really care whether we're conscious or not. Otherwise, it wouldn't move and shake and do these things while we're dreaming. In fact, it wants to do that because we've got our ego out of the way, because then the body is free to move and integrate and process. So that's where, when we're having something moving in the body, we tend to come up out of it and think about it. And, the minute we use the term sad or happy, that's an intellectual construct. Because what it's really saying is, when I have these experiences in my body, these sensations, these movements, these actions, these pulsations, these energetic shifts, I call that anger, or I call that fear, or I call that sadness, or I call it grief. It's not wrong or bad. It's not saying not to do that. But what we often do is we don't dive further into the body and go, what does this feel like? And not just what does it feel like, because that's still me consciously experiencing. It's the better question is, how does this want to make my body move? And this is when we start to focus on the movement, then all of a sudden we get underneath the story. And because the movements are happening in the moment, and when we focus on how the body wants to move and we learn how to surrender that, then more of the body starts to reawaken itself and come out of those immobility responses. Because, and I remember my ex-partner, often if I was upset about something, and this is the normal thing, we all do this. If you come into a room and someone's crying, it's like, say, why are you upset? First question is why? Why takes us instantly into the story, and it takes us away from the body. And I used to say to my ex-partner, I'm saying, sorry, that's the wrong question. When I'm upset, never ask me why. Ask me something like, where does that want to express? Where does that want to move? What wants to move in the body? Because that takes us back into the physiology of the body, where ultimately all this unresolved trauma and the state of our autonomic nervous system, that's where it all resides. Does that explain it enough?
Yeah. And my brain is circling on so many different possible examples of that in my own life that I've experienced,
Yeah. I think it'd be great if you could give us and the listeners an example. That would be really helpful.
So I'm normally a very calm, contained person. I don't outwardly express my anxiety or anger or anything very often, which I understand can be an issue. But, the other day, I've had a long week. I'm, not as rested as I would like to be. And, it was just something silly. Like I ran into the corner of the wall or something and, hurt my elbow, something silly like that. And all of a sudden it was like, bing, I am really like, that really angered me. And instead of containing it like I might have if there were other people in the house, I was by myself and I lashed out and kicked the wall and was really pissed off and really. Is that sort of what you're talking about?
100%. Yeah, because what's happened in that moment, and there's so much in this, and we wanted to talk about Gabor Mate, and there's a brilliant talk. I can send it to you. You can put it in the show notes, where he talks about, as young children, we have two needs: authenticity and attachment. And when being authentic is going to challenge our attachment, we learn to suppress ourselves. So what I loved about what you said there in that story was, if there were other people around, I wouldn't have behaved like that. I would have controlled my behavior, but my body effectively still wants to respond like that. And that's this whole concept of where we get trained and we learn to contain. And again, it's not the feeling of being angry, but it's the expression and the movements And for most of us, this, begins in very early childhood, where expressions of anger or fear or whatever are not acceptable. And so we want to have a tantrum, and we are externally trained to not have tantrums. And when we think about tantrums, what we're really saying is we're externally trained to not let that experience be expressed through the movements of the body. And so you think about it, right? When you kick that wall, if we look at it from the behavioral level, it's like, oh, you're kicking. Great. But if we look at it from the physiological level, what does that mean? All the blood flow has had to go into your muscles. Your muscles have had to generate movement. The tension and the suppression of the movement that has to be done by the movement system, it either needs to contain it by getting really tense, which is horrible, or it has to go in an even more sort of shut down state where we lose energy and there's a lack of vitality. So in that moment, think about your heart rate has gone massively up. Your adrenaline levels have gone up, which is not a bad thing for that sense of reawakening power. Everything's switched on. Your senses are coming alive. There's this flow of energetic movement, which is being reawakened in the physiology of the body. Everything else is starting to move. Your diaphragm's going to change. It's going to take a big breath and tighten up. So when we look at what's happening internally within your skin, you go, wow, look what's happened in that moment. That little bump, that innocuous little bump into the wall has given your system an opportunity to come alive again in a way that normally you, and I'm the same, I wouldn't let that happen, because if someone sees me being angry, that's going to be too overwhelming. That becomes the ingrained pattern. It's part of the reason why we have, nightmares and lots of stuff happening when we go to bed, because our conscious mind and our ego is out of the way. So that part of ourselves that's learnt to contain these things because they're not acceptable to ourselves or others, when it's not there, it's like the body's like, right now, Holly's gone to sleep, Richmond's gone to sleep. Good, now we can actually deal with some of this stuff. And it's not about just sort of letting it go, because the body's going, we've got to come back out of freeze. We've got to reawaken the system. We've got to get everything moving again. And so, because normally what happens, Holly, is, exactly in that moment when your system says, let's move, let's create this massively powerful movement, the conscious part of is going, stop. And so it's stuck. So this is where we get into this double bind, where the sympathetic system is on, but it's so habitually shut down because that helped us survive at the time. Like, if being angry was meaning like my parents were going to abandon me, well, then I've got to learn to do that. Or if I'm in a, life and death trauma state, if I'm being abused, shutting down and not trying to fight back is going to keep us alive. And so our body, our mind, our being, we learn at a deep unconscious physiological level, this is what we need to do to survive. And so later in life, our system is still doing that same thing to survive. One of my favorite sayings is, unresolved trauma is a verb. Post-traumatic stress is a verb. I would even say today, I haven't said this before, but I'll go out on a limb. I'll say autoimmune conditions are a verb. There's something, it's a state that the system is generating in this moment now, because it thinks this is what I need to do to survive. So if I'll give you the story I love telling, is if you've been bitten by a black dog as a child and that's unresolved, then everything to do with dogs, even safe dogs, becomes dangerous. So someone brings me in a little fluffy white puppy, 1 day old, its eyes are closed, no threat at all, and my system is freaking out. Oh my God, it's a dog. Get the dog away. So the point I'm making there is the body is generating that response in the moment, even though there's no real threat, because it hasn't ever fully integrated that past experience. And in our Western culture, this whole process has been suppressed because the way the body integrates and shifts memory from short term, which means my body's still responding when I think about it, to long term means I can remember it consciously, but my body has let go of that response. And the way the body does that to come out of the immobility response is to waken up movement through shaking and trembling and spontaneous movements. And we've all, like you talk about suppressing anger, even far more suppressed in our Western culture than anger is spontaneous shaking and trembling. And Bradford Keeney, there's a great book called Shaking Medicine. And in his book, he says, the great last taboo in Western culture is shaking. He says, you can talk about your sexual preferences, your money, what drugs you've done, all the different things you can do. But if you shake at a physiological, you are instantly stigmatized and pathologized, because shaking can be associated with, illnesses and Parkinson's. So it can be pathological. But in that moment, if you're having a conversation with someone, your body's starting to shake or tremble, we're like, oh my God, look how angry she is. We're not going, wow, look at her body letting go of that anger, calming itself down. Or if we're public speaking and our hands are shaking, we don't go, wow, look at that body that's had has had panic and fear about being judged and rejected. Look at it calming itself down and relaxing. We come across someone on the side of the road who's had a car accident and they're shaking. We don't go, wow, look at this body shaking itself back out of shock. Shock's another word for immobility. We go, oh my God, that is shock. Let's stop that. Let's calm that down. So this is where, to come full circle, is it's much more efficient for our body to reawaken itself after a containment of an emotion or a movement response through spontaneous shaking and trembling, rather than having to act out and express the emotion and the behavior.
Hey, I just wanted to jump in here and interrupt the program for just a hot minute. You know that I'm so passionate about this podcast, but what I'm also really passionate about is helping women with lupus minimize their symptoms, boost their energy so that they can indulge in life again. So if you are a woman who is struggling with lupus, who is sick and tired of being sick and tired, who's struggling to manage your flares, if you're finding that your lupus symptoms are just really getting in the way of you being able to live your life the way you want to, I feel you. I've been there myself and I felt the same way. And what I've found is that there are a certain set of health fundamentals that, once applied, will support you in your foundational health. They will support you in building and maintaining that energy, minimizing flares, and allowing you to, again, indulge in life and follow your passions. So, if that is something that you are interested in creating for yourself, let's jump on a call together. I will walk you through the process that I use with my clients to get them from sick and tired to strong foundation of health by implementing my Health Bridge protocol. If this is something you're interested in chatting more about, I would love to talk to you. Apply for a free clarity call with me, and I look forward to getting to know you soon. And now back to the episode.
So let me bring together, right? You bump your elbow and there's all that tension inside. And I relate. I have these, I can relate to things of the computer's not working and then bang, I want to smash the computer. I might smash my desk, but not the computer. And so in that moment, there's this huge buildup of charge and energy in the body. And we're not designed to live in these high states of charge. So the body's got to find some way to calm that back down. Now, think about this at an evolutionary level. If a zebra gets chased by a lion, the lion catches up to it, it grabs it, it goes into a deep immobility state to survive. And there's videos online and on the TRE websites around the world, you'll see, I think it's an impala in the jaws of a cheetah or a leopard. Anyway, so it's being held there for like 20 minutes or half an hour. So absolutely terrifying, but it looks dead. When the leopard eventually runs away, you can't even see any signs of life, but it's alive, but it's so shut down. And then what happens is when the cheetah gets chased away by some baboons in this example, its body starts to shake and tremble. We don't really know how long because the video is cut up, but the body's shaking and trembling there. It's literally bringing itself back out of that deep survival hibernation state where everything's not moving, everything's shut down. And then after a period of time, it pops up and it runs away. Or the example of the zebra. The zebra doesn't go back to the herd once the lion and says, "Hey guys, I've got to talk about what happened. Here, I need you to sit down. I'm going to tell you the story." Now, of course, they don't have that cortex like we do. So humans do need to at least sort of share and be met. But What its body doesn't then go to the waterhole and say, look, what I wanted to do was kick and feel all this anger and this fight response, because that takes a huge amount of energy. And so the way mammals and humans have evolved is these spontaneous little micro movements are much, much more energy efficient at using the adrenaline, because adrenaline's not there to make us shake. It's there to help us have powerful movement. And then when we've got excessive adrenaline, you've done your bungee jump and your whole body's shaking. It's because your body's massively full of adrenaline because it wants to fight or flee for its life. And it's going, we've got to get this back to homeostatic level because it's way out of balance. And rather than going, okay, like for you, rather than going, I've got to kick and punch for 40 years of childhood unexpressed anger, I've got to act that out. The only reason that comes out as behavior and we feel that as emotion is when the pathway for the body to go, I've had this huge response, my body just shakes and trembles. And it does that, and you may or may not have any feelings of anger or emotion. So I want to try and summarize. I've got long-winded. I'm trying to bring this back together. Is this sense that the body releases the trauma response and reawakens itself through neurogenic movement, which means spontaneous trembling, shaking, could be even twisting and turning. It only needs to express the unresolved emotions with emotion and with behavior if that shaking and trembling or neurogenic pathway is not available to us. And that's where reawakening and reframing, this shaking and trembling is the ultimate trauma healing response in the physiology of the body. And if that pathway is not available, like if you bump your elbow, or if I'm public speaking and my hands start to shake and I'm like, I'm not going to let that happen, then the system says the only other way we can get this out is with a big emotional outburst that overwhelms our cognition. We've got no choice, because it's going, that more efficient pathway of just shaking and trembling to get back to calm is not available to us. And in our Western culture, and I can guarantee for the vast majority of our listeners, we've all been told that shaking and trembling is a symptom of anxiety, fear. You're having a panic attack. The shaking is a panic attack. It's none of these things. It's the recovery and the relaxation response afterwards. So when we reawaken it and experience it as a positive, then the next time you bump your elbow, there's a new, more efficient effect, and it's more effective pathway for releasing that pattern from the body, which is the shaking and trembling.
I can so relate to the shaking during public speaking. I'm just thinking back to when I first started doing podcasts, actually before my podcast, and I just did some Instagram lives. I was invited on by a friend of mine, and you couldn't tell from the video, but I was uncontrollably shivering like the entire time. And I've had that experience before when I'm really nervous. And it was totally uncontrollable. I could not stop it. I just had to try to mentally ignore it, let it happen while I'm focusing on the conversation, But it seems to go along a little bit with what you're saying.
Oh, yeah, look, 100%. Yeah, 100%. And let me just jump in, because it's like really getting clear to me, right? So there's two things I want to say here. So most of us are really aware of our fear much more than the suppression of anger. But Stephen Porges' work with polyvagal theory shows us that these responses in the body, fleeing, fighting, freezing, fawning, or, folding or people pleasing, they're initiated in the body in what they call phylogenetic order, which means the body in a moment, it's like going, can I flee? Can I fight? Can I freeze? Can I fawn, or can I collapse? So that even in a split second, something happens and I'm instantly scared or I'm instantly collapsed, my body has quickly gone, can I do this, 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 and this? So the reason I'm saying this is, in order for us to get into a trauma immobility state, the body has to go through a fear response, and it has to go through a fury response, an anger response, before it gets into shutdown. It happens so quickly that we just go, oh my God, I've collapsed. My energy's low. My system's overwhelmed. It's all in that dorsal vagal, that shutdown state. The reason I'm saying this is most of us are much more comfortable and aware of how scared we are But especially if we're living with chronic illness where you've got those chronic immobilization, dual activations of the sympathetic and parasympathetic state going on, like in autoimmune conditions, often the missing element is the expression of the anger rather than the fear. All right, that's what I'm saying. My whole life, I'd had total terrifying dreams. Anything you could think about, being raped, shot, pulled apart, I've had it. But then it was only after, years of practicing TRE, I started to have dreams of like, wow, I've got this anger. Now, the reason I'm saying this is most of us will relate to shaking with fear, but it just really got clear to me when you were saying there is if I'm in a situation where I'm angry and I'm shaking with anger, that's a whole other level of being shut down because it's an even more strong, energetic movement response. It's an even more charged system than if I'm shaking with fear. So it's like, if I'm shaking, if I've got that much charge, that's really letting ourselves be seen in how angry we are, which of course the other person is going to go, wow, I don't feel safe. I feel dangerous. This feels dangerous. So the reason I'm getting tongue tied, but I'm going to get there. So what came to me was the first is we tend to focus on, we're more comfortable feeling our fear than feeling our anger. But more importantly than that is, and what we're even less comfortable with is feeling the discharge of our anger through spontaneous shaking and trembling. This is what I was trying to say. You're going, I felt scared. My hands are shaking. Most of us experience that. But how often do we say, I felt so angry that my hands were shaking and my whole body was pulsating? That's like a whole other layer of suppressing that because that's an even bigger fury charge in the body that we're not letting discharge because that shaking, if it's associated with real anger and fury, that's like a whole bigger level. So long story short, we're suppressing the shaking and trembling as a culture when it's discharging anger much more. We're all quite comfortable with us shaking in fear, but very rarely do we go, wow, I was shaking, and not in fear, or I should say coming out of fear, shaking out of anger. And that's a missing link. In the same way that our body goes into these states, there's often this expression. And again, if we focus on anger, we think, I have to go back and cathart. I have to smash the pillow. I have to do this. I have to behave. I have to feel anger. I have to remember. I have to express anger. But people don't want to do that, and it's not efficient. But we've got this other pathway. It's like the emergency exit in the nervous system, which is we don't necessarily have to feel the anger or express it or behave angrily. If the system says, hey, we can downregulate through those states using that adrenaline to get us back to calm. And that's exactly what it is. It's like that crying. Afterwards, you're like, oh my God, I feel relieved because the physiology of the body has calmed down. So this is and I would hazard a guess that the vast majority of people living with autoimmune conditions, which is that chronic freeze shutdown state, probably most of them are quite in touch with the movements of the body of fear and anxiety and feeling overwhelmed and scared, but not necessarily feeling those responses of like, wow, I hit the wall and I was ready to smash the wall. My teacher, David Berselli, said the TRE founder, I'll never forget talking to him one day after talking about TRE, and I'd been doing it for a long period of time. And he talked about, feeling homicidal rage. Like the reality of your fight response in a trauma situation this is life and death, whether it is or not, but it feels like that. And the ultimate fight response is, I'm going to live and you're going to die. So that amount of power. So as I'd been on my journey of sort of coming out of all those freeze states, going, gee, I remember getting on a plane, Holly, and there was a woman sitting in the third seat near the aisle, and then I had to get past her. But I also had to put stuff in the overhead lockers. And there was a big line of people behind me. And because I had to get stuff out of my bags, I was holding everybody up in the line behind me. So I call this post-security screening anxiety. You know that anxiety you get when you're holding people up and you're like, fuck, I'm going to go, I'm going to go.
I'm feeling it right now. Just with
You're relate, right? Okay, you're relate. So this is the thing. Until this moment, I've always called that post-security screening anxiety, that sense of when you're holding the line up. Well, this day, I got on the plane, and in that moment, I was starting to feel my anxiety. And I'm looking at the people and I'm thinking, how can I basically avoid holding them up? But really what I'm saying is, how can I avoid feeling this anxiety inside me that I'm holding them up? So in my mind, I'm thinking, if the woman who's sitting in this aisle seat, if she just moves one seat across, I can now stand there, do everything I need to do over the next few minutes. All those people can go past, all solved. Now, in my mind, it's running at a million miles a mile. So all I said to her is going, oh, could you just sit in the next seat, please? And she just looked, I didn't explain, so I can stand here. And so there was no context. So she's completely confused. And so she just gave me a blank look. And so she didn't move. And so in the next moment, then what I said was, and this was the thing, my face and my tone went, if you sit in that seat there, I can stand here and those people can get past while I'm getting my things out of my bag. And then once I've done that, you can move back here and I will sit in that seat. Now, that's kind of how it came out. Whereas internally, and I can't use all the expletives on your podcast, but I was like, if you haven't did that, I'm going to fucking do you up. I was ready to kill her, literally. And so the reason I'm sharing this story is, again, this follows on, is for 10 years since I remember talking to David Berselli about this post-security screening anxiety, I never called it post-security screening anger. And that was this missing element, so that all of a sudden, like you bumping the wall, this woman who's been completely innocuous, doing nothing wrong, I'm not explaining what I'm doing, I'm behaving calmly, but I am tense because internally there is an inferno. Now, nothing to do with this moment. It's because in the past, I haven't been able to express that behaviorally. So I haven't learned, my system hasn't learned how to be calm in that state. So it then wells up. And again, I'm saying I was feeling my anger. I was feeling the containment of my anger, thankfully, because I can't be yelling and screaming or punching or whatever. So it's not that that's wrong. But in that moment, I wasn't feeling, oh my God, I've had this anger response and my body's shaking. That wasn't even on the table. It was like just the tension. And this is where with autoimmune conditions, often the body's gone beyond that tension state to contain the movement, and it's gone into the fold or the flop response. And this is really important, because if you think about, if the body wants to move, the muscles have got to contain movement, and they can do it in one of two ways. I mentioned this earlier, but we didn't cover the second one. So the first one is the generation of tension. So literally, the body wants to move, and to contain movement, the muscles just tighten up, and it's unconscious. Well, like, oh my God, my shoulders are so stiff after that day at work. So there's that chronic tension. But if you've ever seen a video of like a cat playing with a mouse, where the mouse is playing dead, or we have the term playing possum, where the opossums go into that thing, collapse response, they look like they're dead. They're floppy. They're not hard. And so this system, where the vagus nerve that's calming down the body actually switches on even more, and it starts to shut down our systems. So heart rate goes back down, breathing rate goes down, muscular energy, muscular power goes down, energy levels go down, hope and hopefulness goes down, enthusiasm, passion, enjoyment all goes down. Everything shuts down as a survival response. So the reason I'm saying this is that these states are even more heightened. They're beyond when I'm feeling, oh my God, I'm so tense containing this. I don't even feel, and I'm going to use the word emotion, but I don't even feel the movement in my system. I'm not even aware of, all I know is my immune system is attacking itself, and I'm getting all these secondary symptoms. The autoimmune is the secondary symptom of what's happening in the body, which is there's a containment of movement, but it's so deeply buried or contained that there's still the impulse to move is even almost disappeared. We don't even feel, most people with autoimmune conditions aren't going, oh my God, I feel I've got this burning inferno. I just want to kill everyone. Because in the survival response, when a mouse is being held or on the floor in front of the cat, if the body mobilizes and if it has hope and it takes action, that stimulates the predator. That's why the cats, they flick the mouse. They're trying to make them wake up, because the predators, we think evolutionary wise, need the stimulation. It's the chase. And so when that mouse's body shuts down, it's not consciously doing that. Its body's not tight and stiff. It's not having any emotional experience in that moment at all, because the system is saying survival is to completely shut down, to be filled with endorphins, be completely disconnected from what's happening internally and externally. So the experiences we function just saying, what I'm aware of, I feel really calm. Like, you're saying, I'm a calm person. I behave, and I'm not even aware that I've got all this movement that needs to happen. And this is where TRE is so valuable, because most of the story is, I've got all this anger that I need to express. That's something completely different. And the reason was because in our traditional approaches, the only way we could get that tension out was by expressing it behaviorally and emotionally. And in TRE, we see this all the time. When the body starts to shake and tremble itself, that's a much deeper part of the brain and the brainstem that may or may not involve emotions. But the more I do this work, the more people just go, I didn't have any emotional experience. It just shook. And at the end of it, like after a cry, I feel more relaxed, because that pathway is much more efficient than having to emote it out. Now, if your organism needs you to remember a specific event or have the emotion or the crying, again, people go, oh, I'm having an emotional release because I'm crying. The diaphragm doesn't care whether it's emotional. The diaphragm just needs to move. Great. The face muscles need to reawaken. The breathing, everything needs to reawaken through that. So it's less about, I just wish people would stop saying, I'm having an emotional release. And they started saying, I'm having an emotional reawakening. Like, what do you mean? Is my body trying to reawaken so I can feel more anger? No, it's trying to reawaken the movements, the movement system, the movement in all the systems of the body. So the body's more alive and can pulsate and be more here. And makes sense?
Totally. Again, I have like multiple different things that I want to talk about at once.
Yeah.
No, I think that makes total sense. And I do want to get into more of like what actually doing TRE exercises means and looks like. But before we dive into that, just to bring it back to the trauma responses and or I should say the big T and little t traumas that we have accumulated over our lifetimes. You mentioned Gabor Mate and all of his work, along with Bessel van der Kolk, if I'm saying that correctly, and a few others, Dr. David Clark, and then what you're doing. It's all in line, and it all goes back to how these, I guess, internalized traumas that we haven't been able to work through for, a multitude of reasons stagnate in the body and are recognized by the body. And in turn, we have this dysregulated nervous system, and that can turn into autoimmune conditions or long-term chronic health issues. And so I'm curious, because somatic exercises, somatic work is also very trending right now, and for good reason.
Yeah.
I'd like to know where the differences lie between doing somatic work versus TRE, if that's something that's good to do together or if they're two totally separate things. I'd love to learn a little bit more about that.
Yeah, look, absolutely. They hand in glove.
Okay.
And what I would say is that the somatic, and the key difference, Holly, is whether what we are doing is being created or generated by our conscious mind, or whether it's a true bottom-up process, which is being generated by, let's call it, the autonomic nervous system. So, for example, I can go and do yoga or Pilates or somatic pandiculation or movement that I am consciously doing. And that's wonderful, and we know the benefits. Keep doing that. But the difference with TRE, and TRE, look, to be clear, TRE is only one modality. You've got, somatic experiencing, bioenergetics, core energetics, and then you look at cultures around the world, Katsujun Undo, Seiki Jutsu, the Kalahari Bushman. There's all these cultures that recognize that there's something different when the body is generating the movement itself. And that's the critical difference between what we're doing with TRE or these other, we call, say, neurogenic techniques, versus people think, oh, I'm doing bottom-up work because I'm focusing on the body, but it's often still top-down because the focus is coming from my mind. I am moving my body is different from my body is moving me. You know, I can do an Osho shaking where I can put the music on and I can shake and bounce up and down. Wonderfully effective. But it's different when the body starts to shake itself. And so a lot of those practices where we're really aiming towards is when the body takes over and it starts to generate those patterns. Because the body, you know, if we say, yeah, the body remembers, but the body also remembers how to let it go if we just let it shake and tremble. And this is where we need to upgrade our analogies, because a lot of us still think about, you know, capital T trauma, small t trauma. I've got a million traumas from the rest of my life and my bucket is full. And this is why I say unresolved trauma and PTSD is a verb, because we think about it like a noun. Oh, it's stuck in my body. I've got this thing. It's not me. It's a trauma. It's separate from me, and I've got to tip it out. So if I've got 400 million pieces of little t and big, you know, a couple of big T trauma, and it's taken me 40 years to accumulate those, oh my God, I'm going to have 40 years of tipping these out one by one. And I need to go and remember every one, because if I remember it all and if I understand it all, then I'm going to be okay. It doesn't work. It's like we know why we're stuffed up, but it doesn't mean it's changed in the physiology. Whereas if we understand that, rather than going, oh yeah, this trigger from, oh, you know, when I was 3 and my mother did that, oh, I'm working on that. That's coming up. I'm releasing that today. And then tomorrow, oh, the next day when my mother did that and my father did something, well, I've got to release that. It's an endless process that takes forever. We're doing the work. Whereas when we recognize what's happening is, in this moment, the fluffy white puppy comes through, whatever it is. I bang my elbow on the door. The woman won't move when I ask her to get out of the way so I can not be so stressed. If we recognize it's like a software issue, like in a computer, my system is going, this is how I survive now. My ego says, oh, it's because of how you go. No, whatever it's learned over the last 50 years doesn't really matter. All it knows is, in this moment, this is how to survive. And for people with autoimmune conditions, how to survive is shut down, contain, don't move, don't have stuff. You know, it's like in that internal sympathetic, parasympathetic, stay on, be in the survival state. We have to be surviving. In fact, we have to be so highly stressed that my immune system is not just fighting external pathogens, it's just fighting everything. It happens to be fighting myself and my own cells. It's such a heightened survival state. Everything's dangerous. But when we recognize that that's something that the system has learned to do and is doing right now, it's a verb. It's happening. So here's what I like to say to people. If you have a capital T trauma, how long does it take for your body to go from calm to its most extreme survival state? It's a split second. You know, the car's coming towards you, bang, you're in your most extreme survival state. And a lot of this stuff, Holly, comes from pre-birth. We know the limbic system and the brain system, they're fully online in utero. They come through birth trauma, stuff that we're never going to have story for, you know, cesarean births, cord clamping, which is like cord clamping, I think, is one of the hugest overlooked traumas in the world, because if you have your cord clamped before the placenta has organically disconnected from the uterine wall, and it only happens when your lungs are fully functioning and you're getting all your oxygen yourself. So when you get your cord clamped when you're still in the birth canal because the cord's around your neck, it's effectively like someone putting their hand over your mouth for life or death survival. Now, we don't have a memory of that, but the physiology of the body has that. The only reason I want to bring that forwards is, again, when we focus on, I've got to do my consciously directed cognitive therapy and work out what the trauma was, you never, in some altered states, you'll get there. You go and do ayahuasca or whatever, you might have memories of your birth and stuff. But ultimately, it's not about remembering that. It's about the body being able to come back out of that state. And so when we recognize, right, my system has reactivated this, my software program, it's just done this, then we start to go, wow, I'm looking more at neuroplasticity and training my system to not have to activate like that.
Really quick, Holly B here. I just wanted to interrupt the podcast to ask you for a quick favor. Can you take just a moment to like and subscribe to this podcast on whatever platform you are listening in on? It makes a world of a difference, and the reach of this podcast, it takes like literally under 10 seconds. So go do that right now. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And now back to the episode.
But once it's activated, theoretically, how long does it take for the body to let go of that response? And theoretically, it can be like, it could be a single breath. Now, for most of us, if we've got 50 years of not letting go of that response, that pathway takes time. And so that pathway takes shaking and it takes trembling. But every time we activate or access that neurogenic release, we go, I was feeling furious. And the ultimate sort of neurogenic release is you cry. You cry for 5 minutes and then eventually it's like, it's gone. And so that's a reset. Rather than thinking I've poured out that one particular trauma, now I've got 648,000 to go with my therapy. It's like my system got activated again because it's learnt through all these past histories. And now it's deactivated and I'm calm. And now we're starting to move in, I can go into those states. I can come out of those states much more effectively. And so this is where with autoimmune, we've got a nervous system, a system that is trapped in ultimate survival activation. And what's missing is, how do I come back out of that? And I can guarantee that all your listeners have spent a good part of their lives doing everything they can consciously do. This is what was happening in my life when my body was breaking down. Doing everything I can consciously do to fix that. And for some people that might work, but for most of us, it's like we're still struggling away and we want to keep doing all those things. But the missing link is going, I'm not consciously choosing to be in survival state in my nervous system. I'm not choosing to have my immune system hyperactive, fighting everything, including me. It's not a conscious choice. So doesn't it make sense if the body has activated that pathway is not conscious, that there'd be a way to deactivate that unconsciously? And that's what the shaking and trembling is it gives the system the chance to come out of like that high immune state is the ultimate immobility response. It's like I'm not even fighting what's outside me. It's so shut down and contained that I'm fighting what's inside me, which is the metaphor for our life. We're all fighting that internal battle. And so recognizing that the way to unwind that, the pathway out, is to let the body shake and tremble and release some of that shutting down. I can see that's touched something very deep for me. So let me.
I know. I've never heard anybody speak to autoimmune conditions this way and what's going on internally in this way. And it gave me goosebumps, truly. Brought a little bit of tears to my eyes because I don't know why this isn't being spoken to in the broader context of things when it comes to this healing conversation. And this needs to get out there because that just, again, that makes so much sense to me. If it's an unconscious response, why wouldn't we go to the unconscious to try to heal it?
That's right. And this is the gift of David Berceli, because most of the trauma therapists in the world, the big names like you've mentioned, have come through the pathway of cognitively directed practices and therapy and talk therapy. Whereas David Berceli has come to this process through, he's an amazing man, long story, but has come through this by recognizing the movements, being focused on the tremoring and the shaking and focusing on that. So that's where I say, what difference would it make if people went, wow, I've got an autoimmune condition, I've got a movement condition? Really? Who's ever said that? And the reason that doesn't happen is because most therapists working with trauma are not focused on movement. They're not trained in movement. They're trying to integrate the body and the nervous system, but not the movement system. But autoimmune conditions, I'll go out on a limb here, I haven't said this before, but I'll say it's a movement condition. I'm not going to say a disorder, but it's a movement issue. And then there's everything else that comes along with it. But it's not about, how do I move my arms through space? It's about the movement within the system of the body, because that heightened freeze, shut down, survival state, this is the autoimmune condition is a secondary condition that's been caused because the systems of the body have been contained in this ability to shake and move. And so, what I do want to also say to people, and this is another really important thing, is because often when we hear this information and we're like, oh my God, I'm going to survive, I'm going to be okay, and we get hope. And that's a wonderful thing where all of a sudden we're like, this is what happened in my body. It was like I found the emergency exit. Finally, when I'm stressed and angry and tense, there's a healthy way for me to let that go rather than overeating or doing unhealthy, addictive stuff. But often then we think, oh my God, I'm just going to do some TRE and I'm going to be healed, and we feel wonderful and we're full of all, get carried away. Whereas one of David Berceli's wonderful quotes is, we heal at the rate of the body, not at the rate of the ego. Because our ego gets this information and says, this is it. This is the thing I've been looking for. Once I start doing this, my autoimmune condition, everything in my life is fixed. And we often will go through that. I went through that for myself. It's like, oh my God, I tremor. My mind shuts down or calms down. I've got no anxiety. I can function. I can socialize. I feel alive. I'm like, this is... And then a couple of months later, you're like, there's a bit more to this journey. So I just want to put that in there for the listeners, is to keep in mind that, again, it's like we're training neural plasticity, and that takes time. We often do TRE. People get up and they're like, oh my God, I feel relaxed. And that's just because the system in that moment goes back to a homeostatic calm state. Like the nervous system goes, we can calm down. We're like, oh my God, I feel like I've been meditating for 3 hours and I haven't done anything. My body's done that. But then over time, when we want to change those patterns, that takes ongoing practice. And often, we bump the elbow, and when we're coming out of freeze, because sometimes we're more reactive for a period of time, because it's like we're going, oh my God, I love this analogy. It's like, in that moment, my nervous system, when you bumped your elbow, when I was standing there and that woman moved, my nervous system is like 3 years old here. I'm having a tantrum, because that's how developmental trauma works. Is that what happens is when we stop letting that little expression and happens, we throw a tantrum and then we integrate it, and then we learn how to accommodate that so we become more mature in our nervous system. It's like we get stuck there. And so for 30 years, I never expressed my anger. For 40 years, and then all of a sudden when it comes out, the last time my system expressed that anger, like just it moved and it let my body move me, was when I was 2. So it comes out like a 2-year-old. And the reason I say this is then as we keep doing the tremoring, life then helps us mature and grow up, or what I like to call physiological maturity, which means I'm not behaving and consciously trying to behave like a mature being, but my nervous system is responding like a mature nervous system, so that the next time I'm in that same system, in that same state at the nervous system now, I feel that anxiety coming, I will often laugh, partly because that's the anxiety, partly because that's the discharge, and whereas now there's this new opportunity to go, wow, I'm probably going to tremble because I'm going to have some anger. But again, it's not about the anger, it's about the trembling. So what I'm saying is, when we learn how to let this shaking and trembling response happen regularly, it becomes part of our life. And it literally almost like lets go of those little responses. It resets us the same way that anyone who's got a dog will see that their dog will shake and tremble multiple times a day. It's something that our mammalian human system is meant to be doing on a regular basis, but we're not. So that I'm just saying here, for those listeners who are going, oh my God, this could be it, I'm going, yeah, this is part of it, but it's not necessarily a magic bullet. It might be, don't rule it out. You might do the tremors. Like if your system calms down in that moment, you're like, your autoimmune condition in that moment is not happening in that moment. This is really critical, because again, it's a verb. It's something that the system is going back up into survival. So if you do a tremor and at the end of that tremor, you're like, oh, I am calm and relaxed. In that moment, you don't have an autoimmune condition. It's gone in that moment because your system is calm. We don't need to be fighting everything, and the immune system doesn't need to be fighting there. Well, then it's a matter of how long does that calm? Oh, then I get up off the floor and the first thing I see is my bills and I'm like, oh my God, and I'm bang, the system's back there again and my autoimmune condition is back. Whereas people don't talk about that. We think about it's like, it's a noun. I've got this condition. I've had it for 10 years. It's permanent, but it's not. It's something that the system is activating. And so then what we're doing with TRE is we're going, great, it's back. Guess what? Do you know any way to switch it off again? Yeah, I can do that shaking and trembling thing. Great. Lie down on the floor, shake and tremble, switch it off, help your body switch it off. And then it comes back and that becomes the ongoing journey over time. And then there's a whole lot of life learning and lessons in that. So I hope that just keeps it in a grounded sense of like, yeah, this is a missing link. And when we start to think about it differently, then we start going, oh, I've got to work through my 450,000 little t and capital T traumas, and that's the way I'm going to get to calm. Is going, how can we focus on getting the system back to a calm state, switching off that response? And again, we don't necessarily have to do it. All we have to do is go, hey, I'm going to give my body 10 or 15 minutes to shake and tremble and let my body do it. And then the more we do it, it's a forward feedback loop. The body comes out of it easier. But it's not, this is the reason I tell that story about coming down the curve. It's not necessarily all smooth sailing. We might find that we've got some unresolved grief, that we've got some sadness, that we've got some loneliness, that we've got some fury, we've got some whatever it is that we haven't yet been able to move through. So we might feel more. I can't remember the person who said, we often have to get better at feeling before we start to feel better. Whereas I would say really what it's about is letting things move more. So even if I'm starting to feel sad, or if in me speaking to you now, Holly, you start to go, I'm feeling sadness. It's not the sadness that we need to get better at feeling. It's letting the body cry. It's letting the tears flow. It's letting the face, letting the lips quiver, letting the cry come through. That's what we need to let happen so that we become more alive in our full humanity.
I love this conversation. Can we do a quick
TRE?
Just a quick walkthrough of, because I guess we haven't gotten to that yet. How you're talking ways of allowing the body to do spontaneous movement. And so far, in my experiences that I've shared, that's like not exactly spontaneous movement, or that's not coming from the bottom up. That's me acknowledging anger, for example, punching or kicking a wall. I'm creating that movement.
Yeah.
And so I'm conscious of that. So I think TRE, you're talking more about allowing the body to do its unconscious work. Right. So how do we put ourselves into a state where we're giving ourselves time to do these exercises? Not top down from bottom up.
Yeah, great. And so this is where we use the term, it's not accurate because it's not just the nervous system, but we delineate what we would call neurogenic movement, meaning that I'm not consciously doing it. It's not volitional. I'm not choosing to move. My body is starting to move, and it generally starts with the shaking and trembling. So the beauty of what David Berceli was discovered in terms of the trauma model, but this is stuff that's been worked on. Alexander Lowen in bioenergetics, Wilhelm Reich was using this well before. So it wasn't that he invented this, but the beauty of what we do with TRE is we just use muscle fatigue to start to experience that shaking and trembling. So anyone who's ever been to the gym or held a Pilates position or a yoga position, we know that experience where you just fatigue the muscles and they start to shake. But similar to in the psychotherapeutic world where we go, oh, that's a symptom of anxiety, or traditionally, in the physical health world, if you're shaking at the gym, we're like, that's weakness. And so we suppress it. We try to cognitively override it. And on one level, that's true because you're like, I can't stop that, so I don't have the conscious control. But with TRE, all we do is, and it's a misnomer, the name. Originally, years ago, you had to do this set of exercises, but we could have your body trembling within 1 minute. And literally, you can do it with any muscle group, anywhere in the body. But most often what we do with TRE is people are lying on their back with their legs, soles of the feet together, legs in like a diamond position, like a butterfly position. And then all you do is lift your muscles, lift your knees up and you hold them there. Because at a muscle fiber level, the way that the muscles hold, they don't just actually hold still, that the muscle fibers actually can contract and relax so fast that it feels like my arm's not moving. But at a physiological level, they're already tremoring or buzzing. And so all we do with TRE is you just find a position, you hold that position, and then when you start to feel that little shake or tremble, instead of stopping it, you learn how to relax and let it happen. And then once it starts to shake and tremble, the next thing we do with TRE is we say, now, because that feels like you're not doing that and you're not controlling that, then we'll say, now slide your legs out and stop the tremoring, and you take the muscles off load, and you're like, oh, I can control that if I need to. Because if you've associated shaking and trembling with trauma and panic attacks, it's like, this shaking thing is bad, it's negative. So you have to have the experience of like, I can let it happen, but I can also take control. I'm not out of control, dangerous. And so then people bring their legs back up, the shaking builds up a little bit more. We have an embodied experience that the shaking is positive, and I'm not going to end up in a psych hospital. I'm not going to be overwhelmed. It's not bringing up all my unresolved trauma and terror. And we relax a little bit. And when we relax a little bit, the body's like, oh, there we go. He's relaxed a little bit. And a little bit more starts to shake. And then if it builds up a bit much, like slide your legs out like, oh, and it stops. And then gradually, very quickly, often in a session, the body will go from little shaking and trembling in the muscles we're using to the rest of the body starts to shake and tremble. People's eyelids might start to flutter. Their hands might tremble. Their whole body might rock side to side. Their head might go side to side. And so the beautiful thing here is, it's one thing to say, hey, everybody, shaking's safe. That's great at an intellectual level. But if you've got 30 years of panic attacks where you've associated shaking with panic and it's wrong, well, one intellectual change might make a difference. But what really makes the difference is when you go, wow, I had the similar shaking experience and I felt good. In fact, I felt better afterwards. Then it becomes an embodied knowing an embodied knowing. And so this is where when people experience TRE, as I say, there's lots of different approaches, but for me, TRE is the most simple and easy and most efficient, and in my opinion, the most effective I've seen, because it just bypasses all the story and the cognitive stuff in the moment, and it just dives into connecting with this shaking response, letting it spread, and then the way that it spreads, where the body shakes, how the body shakes, is determined by the body. So we just let go. Now, there are things we can do to try and help the shoulders move or help the hips move, but what's important is we want to recognize that it's the organic wisdom of the body that's leading us. It's like, put the ego aside for a while, or bring it in, try something, and then put it aside again. Because the body, this is the thing, the body's keeping the score, but the body knows how to unwind that score. So we just go, right, we're going to hand ourselves over. And for me, Holly, that was one of the most liberating things in my entire life. Like, my background is as a physiotherapist, or in the US, you'd call it a physical therapist. My entire training was that it was my job to fix you. If you've got a problem, I have to do the fixing. And if I've got a problem, therefore, I have to do the fixing. And for me, the most liberating thing was going when I lay down and I let go and I stopped trying to do anything and I let my body do the fixing. It was shifting and changing me in ways that I couldn't have even dreamed of. And that is such a relief when you've got people with autoimmune conditions going, it's up to me to fix this. It's up to me to find the thing or do the practices or do that. That in itself is exhausting. And that moment of going, look, even if it's just for 20 minutes, when you're lying on the floor or in bed at night and your body's shaking and trembling, you don't have to do anything. Take a break. It's not up to you. If it was up to you, I'd just say, well, choose to not have your autoimmune condition and pay me $100 and walk out the door. But we're working with the part that's not up to us in terms of our conscious mind. And so there's this huge relief. Let the body lead the process. So that's the difference between a lot of what we're doing somatically, going to the gym, doing yoga, brilliant, keep doing those things. But add in this little practice, 20 minutes a day or whatever, where you're not doing it and you're letting the body move, and you'll just find this will open up a whole new pathway that you've never dreamed of.
Well, and one thing to add to that too is you said a lot of people with autoimmune conditions feel like they need to figure out how to heal cognitively for themselves. Also, they give away the power to the doctors and say, I have to find the doctor or the practitioner that will heal me. But this, again, puts it in your own hands, but in trusting of your body rather than you having to cognitively do the work.
That's right. It puts it back in your own body. And this is the thing. It's already not in my control. Otherwise, I would choose not to have it. So it reconnects us with where this pattern is, which is in the body or the nervous system or the organism, and this unresolved trauma pattern. Again, when we recognize my autoimmune expression of my autoimmune system being highly attacking, self-attacking, that's the ultimate kind of trauma state in the physiology of the body. So we're going, right, that's going on. I'm not in control of that. Is there something, what's controlling that? Let's call it the autonomic nervous system. Is something that the autonomic nervous system has that can deactivate that response? Yes. Neurogenic tremoring. Great. Let's add that in on top of everything else we're doing in the practitioners and the work. That's all really valuable, but this is why it's the missing link, is because it's an active, autoimmune conditions are a verb. There's something my body is generating right here, right now. And if we can access the body's way of switching off that defense response, for that moment at least, you don't have it. And it's a matter of just training the system to go, it's all right, because we've got to train our system to learn. If we've been living for 40 years that the system's like, in order to survive, I have to be in the most heightened defensive state in my nervous system possible. Well, it might take a little bit of time to learn that it's actually okay to be safe, because when we switch that off, we might feel vulnerable. We might be more reactive. We might be more angry. We might yell at the kids and then have to go, shit, I'm sorry. I'm a 3-year-old in my system. I'm sorry that happened. That was scary for you. Oh, you've got your own little trauma now. Oh, well, have a good cry, have a shake. And then the whole pattern of resolving trauma starts to become integrated. So it's an ongoing journey over time.
So there is one thing that I've noticed, especially with myself, but also in others with autoimmune, is that we tend to have overactive minds, like mile a minute. I don't know if you can relate to that.
I relate.
But yeah, so I'm wondering if consistently doing TRE is something that can sort of move that heady energy out of the body and ultimately calm that mental chatter that is just constantly on overload.
Yeah, absolutely. So the answer is yes. And like anything we talked about, it's a process of training the system to operate in a new way. So here's the thing. The racing mind, like the autoimmune condition, is a secondary symptom of an underlying state in the system. When we're going into fight or flight, our mind and our sensory system is designed to be hypervigilant and working at 1 billion miles an hour. In fact, anyone who's had those traumas where time slows down, the reason time slows down in those moments of trauma is because the mind speeds up. The processing gets so fast that it feels like, oh my God, time's got different. So the reason I'm saying this is the problem is not the racing mind. The racing mind is like the bubbles coming off the top of the pressure cooker, reflecting that the flame that's deeper underneath the bottom of the pot, that's what's generating it. So what I'm saying is a racing mind is a healthy expression and what's meant to happen when you've got a nervous system that's in a fight, flight, survival state. And when we're in those freeze, foldy, collapse down things, it's like when the body's trying to come back out of being fog and shut down. And so then often what we're trying to do is, rather than we're wanting it to calm down, it's the same as with the shaking. When people lie down to tremor, I don't say, look, make your body be calm and make your movements smooth. I say, get out of the way and let your body do whatever, let it go crazy. And then at the end of 20 minutes, it's like it's discharged through the craziness. Same thing with the mind. For many years, because of background in meditation and what everyone would tell me, it's like, oh, my mind's racing. I've got to go from racing to slowing it down. These days, I lie down. I say, now, once you've let go and your body's going crazy, stop trying to slow down your mind. Let your mind go crazy. Let it move effectively. Let those thoughts shake and tremor. Let the mind race. Let it remember. Let it think about it. And this was one of my my greatest experiences when I first got introduced to TRE, I'd been teaching Pilates full time. And I was teaching it in a physiotherapy clinic where I would have up to 5, sometimes 8 people, all on different equipment, all doing different exercises at the same time. Now, because I'm like you, I've got that crazy fast mind. One of the gifts of that is then I could juggle that. But I was working at my absolute extreme capacity of my mind's ability to juggle 8 people doing different stuff and be explaining and educating them at the same time. So what happened to me, Holly, is I would go home, I would lie down and try to go to sleep. And not only was my mind racing, it was racing on Pilates exercises. I couldn't stop it thinking about exercise. Like it was that when I had a late night shift. I would dream about exercises. I would wake up and my brain would still be juggling, oh, this idea for that person and that idea for that person. And then when I first started doing TRE, the first night I did it, I went home, I did this little tremble, not much happened. I slept like I hadn't slept for 30 years. That didn't happen. My brain just instantly switched off. It was like samsara, or not samsara, it's that, samsara. It's like just that Zen state of like, it just stopped. And so for me, I mentioned earlier, I had that experience of like, oh my God, I found the magic bullet. I just do this, my mind stops. Now that happened for a couple of months. But then over time, as I had to start unwinding deeper patterns in my physiology, it's like, oh, my mind races. But what I consistently find is when I lie down and I let my body start to move, when I begin, my mind is racing from the past to the future, to the worries, to the regrets, to the whatever, to the random, it's racing crazy. And then what I do is nothing. I don't try to stop that. I'm like, that's my mind tremoring. In the same way, I don't say, don't stop your arms shaking. I'm like, no, let it shake more. I'm like, let my mind go more. And then what will happen is could be 5 minutes, could be 10 minutes, could be 1 minute. I'll notice that all of a sudden there'll be a moment of peace, or there'll be a positive thought like, oh, wow, I'm excited about. And so the shaking itself helps to calm down the system. And as the system calms down, the crazy monkey mind calms down. So I encourage people to, instead of trying to control that racing mind, is give it time and space to let it shake and tremor and express. And then through that discharge, then it becomes more calm. So we're not trying to, then we can do all the meditation, we can do all those things. And when the system is more calm, then we've got the ability to choose calmness. But most of us, when we try to meditate, we try to stop those thoughts arising. We try to stop the body shaking. Whereas I'm like, no, do the exact same thing, but let your mind go, let your body go. And think about this. When we have a young child who's distressed, do we hold it still? No. Do we go, stop crying? If a baby, when kids are little, we try and get them to stop throwing tantrums. But as a baby, what do? We rock it. We bounce it. And it's the movement that effectively calms the system down. And then when the system is calmer, then when we sit down to meditate, it's like, wow, my mind is calmer, and you've got more ability to consciously choose calmness. So again, it's about reconnecting ourselves deeper into the body so that over time, absolutely, we can have that more slow, calm mind. And once we integrate that, the real magic, Holly, is that having learned how to operate a mind at, a brain and a mind at 1,000,000 miles an hour, we don't lose that. We can then choose to do that and operate at that level when we want to. But then when it's time to switch off, like, right, time to switch off. Now we get better at varying our state and being able to choose our states. So yeah, the issue is not the racing mind. The issue is the racing mind is a reflection. It's like a light on the dashboard. And we're all trying to fix the light on the dashboard. You go, no, you've got to get into the engine and calm the engine down. And when the engine calms down, then when you're doing things to calm the mind, they're going to be more effective. So that's where I say it doesn't replace meditation or mindfulness. It's going to turbocharge your practice. If you tremor first and then you meditate, you'll be like, wow, this is a whole different experience.
I can't wait to try this. And basically what you're saying is it just makes me reflect on all the different labels that we have for all these different things. I'm thinking of ADHD, autoimmune conditions, all the different things. You're the way you explain it, it's like, no, that's just a symptom of, right?
That's
It's all
yeah,
just a symptom of. It's something actively happening within the body, but it's a symptom of, you know,
yes.
not being able to let that energy out.
Yeah, and they're all symptoms of a nervous system, for want of a better word, it's a bit deeper than that, that's in a highly defensive, reactive state. All the behaviors and all the symptoms are perfect expressions of a state and an organism that's in that defensive state. The issue then is, how do we get it out of that defensive state? And that can take time. And there's a whole lot of factors because, if, for example, I don't know, if you're in a relationship that's not working for you and that's stressing you, or you're in a job that you don't like and that's stressing you, or you've got mold in your house and that's stressing you, well, then you can tremor and relax. And then if you walk straight back into that next experience, which is, not healthy for you, well, it's going to continue. So that's what I say. It's not a magic bullet that you go, oh, once I just do this, everything's perfect. We still have to go on the journey of not just healing, but growing and learning how. That's why I'll use the term physiological maturity. Like for you with bumping your elbow, for me the same. It's going, right, I need to learn how to have that sort of experience where I don't get what I want, or something I don't want happens to me, and I need to then have a 4-year-old's reaction to that, which means I'm starting to develop anger without having to break the wall. And then eventually I start having healthy boundaries where I can say, oh, no, thank you. And I don't need to be explosive because my system is actually getting more mature. So that's why I say it's like we still have to go through the journey of growth. And it doesn't mean that it's going to take 50 years to grow from my 3-year-old nervous system up to 50. It's infinitely more quick than that because it's happening in an organism and a mind that's already 50 years old, or however old we are. But we still need to go on that journey to develop those skills so that hopefully we get to the point where we're like physiologically mature, wise, grounded, calm, open-hearted, engaging, loving elders at whatever age. And we don't have a lot of that in our Western society because often the way Western society is innately stressful and triggering and overwhelming, and we're defending ourselves a bit against overstimulation and everything. But yeah, ultimately it's about training our system how it can be calm and relaxed in that moment. And when we find that baseline within inside ourselves, then all those other things start to reduce. The racing mind, the autoimmune condition, even, the behavioral expressions of ADHD and all that sort of stuff. But it's not a magic bullet. We still have to deal with the external stresses, and we have to find that capacity and grow that in the system over time.
And this just seems like that really should be a foundational step in any type of healing process, no matter what it is you're going through.
Absolutely. And not even a healing process. One of David Berceli's great, things he always talks about is it is birthright knowledge. Because in a lot of traditional cultures that use this shaking and trembling, it is birthright knowledge that this process is a really healthy, positive thing. And so on some level, and this is one of the things I'm most passionate about, it's one thing for people going, I'm at an end stage where I've got this secondary symptom going on, autoimmune conditions, how do I heal? Absolutely. But if we can be using this or not even use, if we can be allowing this and normalizing this so that when I fall off my bike, it's normal to cry and express and let that happen, and my system gets back to a calm state so it's not suppressed. Or if I'm feeling scared, to let my lips tremble and my body shake so I get back to calm, then we can help this in a preventative thing. So people will start to use it for getting even better at living, even more alive, even more authentic and connected to themselves, rather than going, oh my God, I've got to heal all this unresolved stuff. We can actually, once that happens, we're like, right, now I can keep using it so I can become more of me, more creative, more alive, more embodied, more relational, all these things. So that this is the other element that, and this is why I'm grateful for people like you with the podcast, is this is information at the moment. We've got to reverse this paradigm that shaking is wrong, it's bad, that it's weakness, that it's fear, that it's anxiety, that we're shaking in shock. Step one is we've got to change that in the Western culture so that people can go, oh, and we can actually use this so that one day the dream would be that every child, because their parents, they don't even have to be educated in school because they just see their parents shaking after they've had a stressful day. It's normal, and that's what happens in traditional cultures that use this shaking mechanism. It's not something people have to learn. It's not like we don't have to train the puppies how to shake like the parents. We don't have to educate them because they just see it, it's in them, and they just let it happen. And that's kind of my dream and vision is one day in the Western world that people will just be going, oh, that's normal. Right, your hands are shaking while you're public speaking in grade 3. Fantastic, little Johnny. We're all here for you. Look, someone else is shaking in empathy. They're shaking as well. Let yourself shake. Oh, fantastic. Now, there's the big breath. Now give us your speech and you're calm. And we've reinforced this positive capability rather than just going, oh, we're only using this after the effect to heal. That makes sense? So it's like this podcast and educating people is, if we start doing it, if children see all the adults doing it, whether they're doing TRE or whether they're just shaking spontaneously when it arises, if the children see all the parents crying, which is neurogenic shaking when someone dies and grieving, that just becomes normal. We don't even have to educate people or give them a scientific explanation to convince the kids why they should be doing this. This just becomes culture, and this is what we've lost in our Western culture, which is why the book I mentioned, there's 2 books I highly recommend. One is Dr. David Berceli's book, The Revolutionary Trauma Release Process, which is a brilliant read, and it's got his journey and really reframes it well. And the second one is Shaking Medicine by Bradford Keeney, if you're interested in the shaking, because he talks about this in other cultures. He doesn't talk about TRE, he wasn't introduced or didn't relate to it then, but this is this thing where we want to have this response back in its rightful place in our culture, which is a part of our normal daily life that we've all been genetically encoded with this resource that we've just all completely misunderstood it and stigmatized it for too long.
And just to tie this all into my big vision with what I do with the podcast and with being a guide for women with autoimmune conditions, as you talked about this bringing people closer and in more connection with themselves and becoming more of who they truly are at a fundamental level, right? On a soul level too. And that for me is what I try to do as I help women build up their strength, build up their health, build up their mindset around everything they're experiencing, is because the world needs us to be our best selves and to shine our light as bright as possible, because that has that ripple out effect to our families, to our communities and beyond. And with all the craziness going on in the world today, we've got all this internal struggle and strife around what's going on, no matter what side of it you're on. And I think that the more we can have autonomy in our decision-making process, whether that's around our health or family situations or beyond that, the more we can make a difference in the world. And so what you teach, what you're speaking to, brings people to that point as well. And what I'm trying to do brings people to that point, and that's the ultimate goal, right? It's not just about, like you said, I'm this coach, come see me, pay me, and I'll make you healthy. It's not about that at all. It's about giving the power back to you.
Yeah, and to come alive. That's it. It's like we're not, I really don't believe that we're put on the planet to heal our things. I mean, that may be a really valuable step, and for some people that might be the key part of the journey, but it's about managing or dealing with that and moving through that, so then we can bring our gifts forwards. And some people's gifts is going to be, I went on this healing journey, I healed this, and I can help others heal. But for most people, that's probably not our life journey. Our life journey is going, oh, I'm this. And it could be, my life journey is to love my children better than I would have loved them before. It could be to run this. So I do have an idea, Holly. What we should do is do a webinar a guided webinar for your community where we just do a session, and we can take people through this online, and then we can stop talking about it and people can stop listening about it and driving their cars and thinking, oh, this is great, I've got some more information, but we can actually do it, because it's about learning my job's just to teach you how to access it, and then it's like, right, now just build it into your life. And now I'm ranting and raving, but let me say this: one of the things that's so great about it is when we're most stressed and we're most fatigued, it's when it's hardest to do self-care.
Yeah.
Whereas the beautiful thing about this is you can wake up in the middle of the night, bring your legs up, and when your body starts to generate the movements, it doesn't take mental focus, it doesn't take physical effort. So when we're most fatigued and stressed, it's like, well, what do I have to do? Oh, you have to lie down and do nothing. You might need to hold your knees up, but once your body takes over, you do nothing. You're just purely letting go. So where a lot of self-care is like, oh, I have to add another thing to my layer of self-care, I have to do another practice. This is not quite like that, because literally you're doing, oh, I'm going to do nothing. I'm just going to completely let go for 20 minutes regularly. So it's incredibly attractive. And because you can use it lying in bed, you could be watching a film, you could be lying on the floor reading. I used to do a lot of my tremoring lying in bed, reading to my daughters going to sleep. I just bring my legs up and shake, and my arms weren't moving and shaking, so it didn't matter. But you can just build it in anywhere, and it doesn't take that effort and that time that most of our self-care practices take. Again, I'm not saying get rid of those. Keep doing those practices, but this is not like another thing I have to add into a load. It's the opposite. You'll be like, oh my God, this is such a relief. I lie down and do nothing, and my body does it for me.
Yeah, no, that's so perfect for anyone with autoimmune, because the overwhelm is such a huge factor.
Yeah.
So,
The system's already overwhelmed. So here's another thing I've got to do to overwhelm myself, to get myself overwhelmed, and the loop continues.
right.
Whereas it's like, no, just lie down, forget it, let your system switch itself off for a while. You go on holiday and you do whatever you want, let your mind go wherever as well. And that is probably someone who's lived, and I relate, entire life in this high state of, hyper vigilant, that can be one of the most amazingly liberating experiences, where for a moment, and that's what we're training, is how do I actually get out of the way? If my system's been switched on and my mind's been here to switch on and be vigilant about everything, it can be so relieving, and so much space. And it's in that space that then we're like, right, well, who am I when I'm spacious? And what's my life, and what are my gifts? And that's what I hear your mission is about. It's like, the tremoring, that we want to help switch that stuff off, but it's really about, like, who am I when I'm alive and open, and my system's not shut down, and I'm not overwhelmed? Who am I? What can I do? What are my gifts? How do I move in the world? Which is incredibly exciting.
This has been an incredible conversation. I would love for you to tell our listeners where they can find you and how they can learn more about these exercises.
Yeah. So and I always say this, I'm not the person they need to find, right? So you can find me through treaustralia.com, and you can find TRE practitioners all around the world through treglobal.com. But if you take one thing away from this conversation, you don't need me per se. You just need to learn how to access this process in your body. And one of the positives that came out of COVID, Holly, was when I couldn't work and I couldn't travel around and run workshops. So I created an online course, which at the time was the first online course. And people were like, oh, you can't do it. You've got to have a provider. You've got to have a therapist there to make sure it's safe. There's been 14,000 people have gone through that course with no concerns about safety or that sort of thing. It's got a screening tool in it. So if you've got major trauma, or you're nervous, or a major medical condition, then go and learn with a TRE provider initially. But that online course, it's 3 sessions. It's less than $100, and it's 3 guided sessions with a bit of the theory and the information. Because at the end of the day, all you really need to know is go, okay, shaking and trembling is good. How do I let it happen? How do I regulate it and control it so I'm not doing too much? So that information is there at the online course at trecourse.com. And so I always recommend people, go there. If you hate online learning, go to TRE Australia or TRE Global and find a provider or do a workshop. But part of what I was so passionate about when David Berceli, when I first brought him out to Australia, was this idea was that we want to find ways to empower people in their own healing rather than going, hey, you need to see me. You need to pay me all the time. And so this is what I'm so passionate about, is going, you can go to this online course, you can learn how to access it, because the important thing is not getting in touch with me, it's getting in touch with this mechanism inside your own body. And then once you learn how to use it, if you contact me, I'll just be like, keep going. And, people might go, oh, I'm having trouble, it's not doing this. And we might go, yeah, we can help you with that. And often I'll say to people, great, go to a workshop and tremor in a group, because like singing, when you tremor together in a group, things will shift and move. So, it's like getting out of that, oh, you need me to do, I've got to do the fixing. Even if I'm working with your body, I'm just going, hey, what does your body want to do? Can we help your body do more of that movement? Can we help that shoulder release? Can we help that thing release? So ultimately, I recommend people go and check it out at trecourse.com. The first few lectures are free, so you can sort of get the information, see about it, do the screening tool, and then if you're like, right, this feels good, then you can do that course and you've got that for life.
Love it. Thank you so much, Richmond. This has been incredible. Any last thoughts to leave with our listeners?
Yeah, the last thought is just to say thank you, Holly. I know you've been exhausted and it's been a long day, and you're right. The last thing I would say this is, and I have very much this habit, we could talk about this forever. And that's very interesting and exciting and enticing. But the most important thing is to dive into the body. This is a long, hard-learned lesson for me. So that if people are feeling that invigoration, that's still just really at an intellectual level. What's important is that reawakening in the body is to go, all right, that's all good in theory. That's going to keep our egos happy. But ultimately, the body doesn't give two hoots whether we understand it, whether we explain it, how we explain it through the polyvagal theory or through any other cultural overlay. The body just needs the opportunity to do it. So let's stop talking and go and do some shaking.
That was so well said.
Awesome crying. That would be, which is neurogenic shaking. Awesome laughing. Anything that's reawakening that body, going into the body.
I love it. Thank you so much, Richmond. That's a perfect ending point.
Beautiful. Thanks, Holly.
Thank you so much to Richmond Heath for sharing his deep wisdom and expertise today. I hope that you're walking away with a new understanding of how your body has been trying to protect you, and how movement, a bottom-up approach over a top-down mindset approach, can be a powerful doorway to regulation and healing. If this episode spoke to you, remember you don't have to navigate autoimmunity alone. I would love to support you on your journey. You can find my free daily lupus guide and symptom tracker in the show notes. It's great for all autoimmune conditions. And you can also apply for a free healing breakthrough call if you're ready to go deeper. Until next time, take a deep breath, give yourself grace, and keep building your bridge back to health.